Welcome to the HR Data Labs podcast, now part of the Work Defined Podcast Network. Join us as we explore the vital role of compensation, strategy, data, and people analytics in navigating today's complex business world. With the resources of Work Defined, we're now bringing you deeper insights and actionable ideas from top experts. Now, here is your host, David Turetsky. Hello and welcome to the HR Data Labs podcast. I am your host, David Turetsky. And with me today, I have a couple of very interesting and very smart people. I have Raswinder and Ankit from Talonode. Good morning or good evening, gentlemen.
Hey, David. Great to be here.
Well, great to have you. I'm doing okay. It's freezing cold outside. It's really, really cold. It is so cold that the weather people are like, look, just don't listen to us anymore. It's going to be cold, so just wrap yourselves up in whatever you have.
Same here.
And keep your feet on high.
Yeah, same here. Same minus 15 degrees. So yeah, just
oh
saving
my goodness.
Yeah.
Good gravy. Minus 15 is bad.
Yeah, it's quite bad.
Yeah,
But
that's pretty bad. Yeah.
Great to be here. Happy to speak with you today.
So, Raswinder, why don't you start and give us a little bit of background on who you are, and Ankit after him, why don't you give a little bit of background?
Great. Yeah. So, David, I've been in HR for about 15 years now. I've spent time across consulting and line roles. I've been at Deloitte, Aon, and spent time with CEB before it got acquired by Gartner. And I've been in line roles where I've pretty much played chief of staff roles with HR tech, HR analytics sort of background. So I've been at Flipkart, Snapdeal, and InMobi, all headquartered in India, but with mostly global presence overall. So that's been me for the last 15 years.
Awesome. Ankit, how about you?
Sure, David. So I have close to 14 years of experience across line HR, consulting, and analytics. You will see, or rather you will hear a few common names across Raswinder and my CV because we have worked together in a few of these organizations. So I also had the fortune of working with CEB, which is now Gartner, then at Aon. Worked with one or two decagons in India in the food delivery space called Swiggy. And I've also led the fractional HR head role at Dell Foundation in India.
Wow, that's cool. Wow, both two smart guys. I don't know. I might have a rough time with this one.
I'm not sure of that. Yeah.
No, it'll be fun because we're all data geeks, and this is going to HR data geeks too, and this is going to be really fun. But before we get into our topic today, what's one fun thing no one knows about you guys? So, Raswinder, I'll start with you again.
Yeah. So, I was just thinking about this, and David, I think for me, there's a PlayStation game called FIFA, which is basically football. You're fairly familiar with it. I supported Liverpool for about 20 years, and I played at least 10,000 hours of FIFA over the last 20 years. So, by some stretch of imagination.
Hold on. 10,000 hours?
Yeah, over the last 20 years. I actually gave up my PlayStation for a year when we were starting Talonode because I was like, if I have my PlayStation, 1,000 hours are going to go away. So let me just focus on setting up Talonode first.
We don't know where he is. We know where he is. That's really funny, Raswinder.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I don't know how you can top that.
I have no intentions of topping that also, David, frankly. So one thing which is also common across Raswinder and me is our shared love for football. So I support Manchester United. So both Raswinder and I, we keep on having some very interesting conversations on, how the rivalry is coming up. So it's almost like we are the yin and yang for each other that we try to complete wherever there is a gap, just like the two football clubs.
Wow.
And another thing about me, I'm a big time caffeine addict. So my day starts and ends with a fresh, pot of brew. And I keep on experimenting with different equipments. So right now I'm on to Siphon, which is a very laboratory, I would say, equipment of making coffee.
So if I have coffee questions, I know who to call.
Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah. He got me hooked to coffee as well, David. So
really?
Now even I have many different types of coffee at home now.
I got to be honest with you. I'm a coffeeholic too. And I'm trying something new. I'm trying to drink tea. And for the last 3.5 weeks, I have not had any caffeine in any form. No Diet Coke, no Dr. Pepper, and no coffee. So if you see me falling asleep during the podcast, it's not you. It's that I'm drinking tea and it's not working out as well as I would have liked. No, I'm kidding. Well, great. Wonderful getting to know both of you. We're going to talk a lot today about HR data governance. And one of the fascinating things about HR data governance is that every company needs to focus on it, but very few do. And we seem like we're the stepchildren here, that we don't get paid attention to. We're usually last when it comes to data or technology help. But we're going to dive in with 2 feet on this. So stick around. This is going to be fun.
What does it really take to lead with impact in today's ever-evolving world? Welcome to Inside the C-Suite, the podcast where influence, energy, innovation, and empathy converge. Hi, I'm Christy Honeycutt, your host. Join me as I sit down with the boldest voices in leadership, visionaries who are not just making decisions, but making a difference. In every episode, we explore the heart of leadership. How do high-performing leaders harness their energy? How do they lead with empathy without losing their edge? How do they turn disruption into innovation and pressure into purpose? You'll hear unfiltered stories of adversity, resilience, and the raw moments that shaped true influence. This isn't about perfection. It's about presence, passion, and the energetic exchange that fuels transformation. Inside the C-Suite is your invitation to lead from a deeper place with intention, connection, and courage. If you're ready to go beyond the surface and unlock what really moves leaders to action, hit subscribe and step inside. You can find us wherever you get your podcast fix. Inside the C-Suite, well, we're an energetic exchange. Let's lead with influence, live with energy, and create with empathy.
All right, gentlemen, let's start with the problem. Why do HR and business leaders struggle so much when it comes to people data? They have, even if they have a modern HRIS system or a modern payroll system, why is the data so bad?
Yeah. So, David, I think, first to clarify, if you ask any leader anywhere in any business unit, everyone's going to say our data is bad. So, you can't restrict it to say that it's only in HR. However, the reason HR is a little different is because with enterprise data, we've seen that organizations have kind of put the effort, time, money behind it extensively because they do believe the ROI is higher. So to start off with, I think the first point that HR needs to do a lot more of is actually really showcase the value and ROI of HR data. I think we've tried that with people analytics, and it's come in leaps and bounds over the last 10 odd years, where there is now a recognized people analytics team in pretty much in most organizations that we work across. So I think we need to keep doing that a lot better and kind of get there. So I think the first symptom root cause essentially is just seeing the ROI come out of the data first.
HR is not very good at ROI.
Yes.
We don't really think about our techniques, our processes, or our data in terms of what's the return on the investment.
Yeah. And I think our return on investment, because it's a lot of the people aspect of it, you try and bring out surrogates or substitutes in terms of how you qualify what value in dollar terms is. I think we need to kind of balance both those sides. There is going to be a dollar value when you look at a talent acquisition cost, a hiring cost, and an L&D cost associated with it. But when you're thinking about motivation, productivity, it's not as easy to measure, right? So you're going to bring in surrogates there to kind of quantify that angle of it. And I think both have to be valued within the organization for it to truly get what it deserves. But yeah, overall, I think there is a gap that we still need to identify. How do we bridge without actually being, too lopsided on either of the ends?
Yeah, I think one of the problems that I tend to have with HR data, because we're people and because we're error prone or because we just forget, if I look across the history of my work with HR, HRIS,
Mhm.
that manager didn't process that promotion, or the promotion
Yeah.
documentation is stuck in, some kind of issue, or
Yeah.
someone promised someone something and never got written down, or someone moved and they didn't
Yeah.
tell anybody that they moved, but they changed jurisdictions and now their taxation's different and their benefits may be
Exactly.
different. So there's a whole host of reasons why HR data may be bad,
Yeah.
and there could be consequences of that. So
Yeah, absolutely.
there is true ROI if you look at each of the individual processes and go, "Oops, we have problems here."
Yeah, and I
And
think that's
the,
probably the second
sure,
one
sure, no,
as
please.
well, right? The second point essentially there is that, to get ROI, you need to have a culture or a mindset of really utilizing the data and keeping it in a way that it can be utilized, right? So I think where we've seen that struggle is exactly what you've called out. Like, it's not to say Salesforce data is pristine, right, in that sense, but the effort that goes into managing it is significantly higher than what it goes into managing it. And it's just the culture and mindset saying that, we need this to work well for ourselves to get the most out of it. So absolutely aligned. I think step by step, there are actions that need to get taken in terms of how do you view data and how do you manage it out.
Ankit, did you have a point you wanted to make?
So you were saying that, a lot of times people don't see how bad the HR data is and what are the consequences downstream. Now, we are already seeing that with the advent of AI, the fragmentation of data across systems, the entire problem is only being magnified with all the AI agents coming into the limelight. And that is where I think HR data will get their opportunity to rise and shine.
What's fascinating about that is that a long, long time ago, it might be 3 years ago, we had on a couple of people, and one of the people was Martha Curioni, and I forget the other gentleman's name. And they were talking about utilizing machine learning and AI to help clean HR data. So creating, and they actually gave the repository as well, where on GitHub this was, utilizing AI to look for signals in the data that showed where there might be inconsistencies or problems with
Yeah.
with HR data. And you're
Yeah.
bringing up a great point, Ankit. The use of AI to try and find patterns in data or try and see where there might be issues is now magnifying how crappy the HR data is. Because if we're using bad decisions and bad data to make decisions on the future,
Yeah.
we're compounding the problem.
Yeah. And the whole host of aspects that you spoke about, David, which is to say that if you made an error in the past, and if you're using that to kind of make future decisions and put it into ML models, AI models, it's only going to get worse because it's not going to understand there's a context to it, right? And that
Absolutely.
context needs to be provided to say, okay, this was probably bad in terms of how you structured it. So, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, completely aligned there.
And the other problem is that AI can't read your mind to find that context unless
Yeah.
that context gets put into some sort of artifact that is
Yes.
readable, or is
Yeah.
like, for example, if you're looking at data and all of a sudden you see there's a bunch of people who've been terminated and a bunch of people who've been hired,
Hmm.
if you don't know that there was a riff and an acquisition done at nearly the same time, you
Yeah.
might you might wonder, or the AI might wonder, what the heck happened here? One group
Exactly.
got let go and the other group got added. We have a turnover problem in that group. Well, yeah, we had a turnover problem in that group. But it wasn't the turnover problem you think it was. So context being everything, and we know
Yeah.
that HRIS sometimes has flaws in the codification or the coding
Yeah.
of those changes.
Yeah.
So, and by the way, to be honest, we all know that there are systems that almost every person listening to this goes, yeah, I know, I've got that problem. Um, that's one of the symptoms of
Yeah.
problems that they're going to continually find if they're using either AI or people analytics to review what they've got
Yeah.
going on.
Yeah, and I think just probably adding on there, right? You took a great example of how there's riff and acquisition happening at the same time, and that's impacting, the organization. But if you were to just think about it, most HR tech or organizations today have a wide tech stack, right? You'll have an HRMS, you'll have an ATS, you'll have an L&D, performance management ecosystem, right? And each typically requires similar sort of data to start with, and then they kind of branch out within their own data sets, right? If you were to ask an AI and say, okay, where should I pick up the employee code from? It's actually not going to know where to pick it up because it's going to see 4 different variations of the truth. And given the great thing about AI is that I can actually understand through tokenization the context you're giving the data in plain English. We have an advantage of actually giving all of that in a documentation, which is fairly straightforward to do so. So as we move forward, I do believe that, you get much clearer documentation around connecting systems to say, hey, if you need to go to an employee ID and then find the employee, use the HRIS, don't look at the performance management data or don't look at the manager data. So I do believe that, HR starting to understand and realize some of these, that they do need a data catalog, a metadata understanding. But it's too far-fetched right now. It's sparse between folks to know that this has to happen. But they'll soon realize that without that, the context engine, you're not going to be able to go too far in AI.
So that brings up the next good question, which is, based on what you just said, what really is data governance and how does it really matter? And what's the urgency in HR? Because I think what you were then getting to is transitioning to, because I heard the word, I heard some of those words of documentation and context. Where does that get to in the world of HR data governance?
Yeah, so I think probably just calling out HR data governance, a lot of times when we call out HR data governance and we talk about it with the prospects that we're speaking with, right? It's very interesting to see how everyone interprets it. So our learning from HR data governance essentially is that it's not data quality. It's a whole host of other things and attributes as well. Yeah. And when you think about it, it's essentially saying, who takes ownership of the data? So saying that, do you have clearly identified users who take ownership of the data? For example, you have HRBPs owning the manager hierarchies, the org hierarchies, just the business part of the data that they work with. And COE leaders and rewards taking care of the compensation and so on and so forth. So it's not an HR ops or an HR tech problem, right? That's the first thing that kind of moves away from being, just data to actually data governance. The second aspect is, how do you clearly define stewardship and ownership of who will do what? So knowing who owns it, but doing what on the data is actually the second aspect of it. And the third essentially is capturing context out of it, saying that who owns the master for something, so that if there is any inconsistency or if there is any need to build something out of the data platform or use it or leverage it anyway, you know where to go from. And the last essentially is the core aspect of data quality. Now, knowing that you have to use data, how do you make it available in a way that it makes it easy for everyone to use the same source of data, but also use it seamlessly across different use cases in parallel?
Yeah, I think one of the things that scare a lot of people when we talk about HR data governance is, first of all, the HRIS people go, another thing I have to deal with. But it actually helps the HRIS people because, as you were mentioning, it's not just them. Basically, we're going to be creating RACI diagrams and we're going to create, catalogs of, to your point, what's the system of record? Who owns this data? How does the data speak to each other? Who makes the decisions on what's good data or bad data? And then creating that glossary, ostensibly, or that dictionary, the data dictionary of what are the valid codes and what form does it take and blah, blah, blah. So ostensibly, this data governance goes across, as you were mentioning, all of those different systems, whether it's recruiting or compensation or people analytics or payroll or what time or talent. All of those different systems have to look at this master Bible, if you will, of who owns what and who speaks to it. And if I have a question, who do I call? And it really does make your life easier if you work in or with that HR data, doesn't it? Ankit, I don't know. You haven't said much today, but I know you have a lot to say on this.
No, absolutely. And you mentioned that why the existing system of records, they're not able to manage the entire data governance space, right? So let's take a very simple example. Like just say an employee shifts from sales to marketing. Now, from a HRMS or a workflow point of view, it's a simple change that, a person is moving across teams.
Right.
But if you look at it from, the vantage point of data, the person's team, his or her manager, the reporting structure, the designation, the incentive plans, the variable pay, the goals, the L&D, everything needs to change, right? Now, if there is no common data dictionary which is governing that what data needs to change where, it becomes sort of, almost like hanging in the air that people go on making the changes across these tech platforms. And if you use this data for downstream audits or your AI agents or analytics, that is where a lot of these challenges then surface. And then people waste time and money to go back into finding, okay, where exactly is the data problem?
You know what reminds me, Ankit? When I was a junior compensation analyst at Morgan Stanley, and I used to get these personnel action forms. They were these gigantic forms. They may have even been double-sided, which was gigantic for the day. And they had, it started out simple. What's the person's name? What's their ID number? What's their job title? What's their job code? Who's their manager now? Blah, blah, blah. And then you had if they're changing jobs, if they're changing roles, right? What does that do? And as you were mentioning, Ankit, there's a whole host of things. Are they changing location? Are they changing department? Are they changing incentive plans? Are they changing their pay? What are the regulations with, if it's a lateral job change, if they're not changing grade, when they can only go up like 8%. But if they go to a different department, we have to do a market analysis to see, are they paid fairly? Do we do an equity analysis to see if they're paid fairly with the other people? So there's a whole host of decisions that then get made. Now we might be talking agentically about were the right decisions made? We might even be talking about the SOR doing a manager self-service form and giving that manager the right fields to edit, which would be miraculous if it was just like that. And then leading them to make the decision by giving them insight. Well, if you give them a 5% increase, there's a 25% likelihood that they're going to leave. But if you give them a 8 to 10%, there's a 0%. Something like that.
It'll be lovely.
It would be. But that all speaks to, when a change gets made, what are the appropriate things that happen? And doesn't that come down to a data governance strategy, or shouldn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And, just to add, I would just also mention two examples. One is a fairly simple example. One is slightly complex. So I was speaking with an ex-regional head of one of the FANG organizations, and we were discussing about data quality. And he was very intrigued as to, why HR data is such a big of a chaos. And he remembered that during my time at these FANG organizations, one of the FANG organizations, he's like, I had no idea about my team's headcount on that particular day. So just imagine the kind of organization we're talking about, and we look at a simple metric like headcount. Even that number, the person had no clue that on that given day, what we're talking about. So that was one simple example of how we have seen data governance, or rather the lack of it, showing up, in places where it matters the most. The other, which is the more complex example, is I was speaking with an HR head. He was fairly excited to launch a chatbot for HR. And, he was saying that it will help us to streamline a lot of the HR VP's time, which goes on to service the employees. And, he was showing me the chatbot. I just asked him to enter two prompts. One, so can I take a maternity leave? The AI agent said, yes, you can. Here is your organization policy.
Wow. Hey, that brings up a completely new host of questions, Ankit.
I'm sure. And the second question I asked him to add is like, what is the organization's leadership?
Interesting. Very interesting.
The answers were variable. It was varying all over the place, and it could not pinpoint towards the right hierarchy in the organization.
Yeah. And by the way, those are very common questions that people have. And or how many days do I have left on my vacation?
Exactly. Vacation days left.
Right. I mean, and it needs to know. I mean, the chatbot needs to, and a lot of times, and I'm not saying they hallucinate, because that's obviously what we talk about all the time with chatbots or with LLM. But the question comes out of have you tested this fully? Do you know what the script is that the agentic or the chatbots are going to give back?
Yeah.
Hmm.
I think just to add on, David, I think our experience of just seeing LLMs, right? They're very good at probabilistic thinking, right? They're basically looking at, what are the different opportunities, using the tokens to kind of put that all together. A lot of what HR has to do with data is very deterministic, right? You
Yep.
need a certainty in the output. And
Excellent.
I think there's great progress being made there, but it's like a whack-a-mole right now. You kind of improve the you improve the output quality, and you realize the time taken to get there, or the tokens taken to get there, just extrapolate 10x, 100x, right? And that's everything is dollar out of your pocket, right? So you're basically still
Exactly.
figuring out the right level of outcome for it. And it starts with a data governance problem, because if you were to think of hallucination, it's basically the way we've seen it in chatbots, is that it's hallucinating because it has 10 different sources of documents, and some of them aren't actually, version controlled. So what it's doing is
Exactly.
figuring out some part of it from version 1, some part of it from version 10, and kind of mismatching it to give you the fastest response possible in the most logical way it feels is the right way. So you're still getting partial answers right. It's just that to get to the entirety of the outcome, LLMs have a little bit of a way to go in that journey.
Yeah, but the problem is that, and both of you made this point, that these are questions that not only are they deterministic, but they're litigious. So
Yeah.
if a person's not getting the answer that they know is accurate, they
Yeah.
could go to their lawyer and go, hey, my company just told me, because a
Yeah.
chatbot is now your representation
Yeah.
of your HR department.
Yeah.
It told me I can't take a maternity leave.
Yeah.
I'm pregnant. Well, what
Yeah.
am I going to do? I'm not pregnant, by the way. I'm just giving an example. Um, but seriously, they might say, "Hey, my lawyer, it's telling me that I don't have vacation days left. I
Yeah.
know I have vacation time. What do I do about this?" Now, one would note you probably would go to your HR person and say, "Hey,
Yeah.
there's," but we live in a litigious world, so
Yeah. We do.
this is a problem.
No, it is, and I think one of the simplest workarounds that and there was, I think, about a year ago there was a case with Ford where on the customer service chat someone had tricked the LLM to giving it a free, like, a truck.
Wow.
Yeah, and the person said, "I'm going to take you to court if you don't do that to me."
Yeah.
And a simple workaround that every organization first thinks of is saying, "I'm going to add a disclaimer saying that answers may not be true, and kind of reach
Yeah.
out to XYZ as humans." And I think that's fair, right? That's where you start the overall journey with. But that's not the answer. I think organizations have to figure out how do you make it really, aligned for a certain set of use cases, and take it from there. And I think just using LLMs is not going to work. You're going to have to build a
No.
deterministic engine at the back end for it to really start working. And I think that's where, data governance comes in, because you need different people weighing in with different thoughts, concepts, bringing it all together for you, giving it the right level of understanding and context, saying, hey, don't use version 9, now just use version 10. That helps you to kind of do that journey.
Well, and I think a lot of organizations are hoping that the AI overlords and these chatbots and these LLMs are going to
Mhm.
make their lives easier.
Yeah.
But I'm here to tell you, it does not save you time. It's going to cost you. And you're going to have to go through those processes of, as you were saying, not only document, but document control. You're going to need to
Yeah.
make sure that the data is accurate. You're going to
Yeah.
make sure the answers are accurate. And
Yeah.
just having that one footnote that you were talking about, the disclaimer, that's going to make everything that you talk about with a chatbot be suspicious. And
Yeah.
then I can't use that data. I'm going to have to still call an HR person, which is the reason why we put in place the chatbot in the first place. So,
Exactly.
but I think one of the things that I think a lot of listeners are asking themselves right now is, and this is our third question, which is probably going to take us the rest of the time here, is where do I start? Because what we've just been talking about is putting in place HR data governance, putting in
Yeah.
place models that might have the absolute latest and greatest, not just of clean data, but of clean processes and uh, documents that
Yeah.
kind of speak to how do we do what we do and where's the answer. So
Yeah.
where do we begin?
Yeah. I think I wanted to kind of bring this in a little earlier when you were speaking, but I think the starting point doesn't have to be a new tech. David. I think organizations really have enough tech within themselves to kind of start, right? And two, the starting point should not be broad. The point is, if you say that I'm going to look at my data from ADS, HRMS, harmonize it, clean it, do all active employees, look at exit employees and kind of mishmash and kind of make sure everything is synced up, right? That's probably where most organizations get stuck. You need to define a narrow use case, a very clearly defined outcome that you're really going after, and saying, what of my tech stack actually allows me to do that? So, for example, if you know your HRMS has very clean data across or processes defined across certain org structure types, certain manager organization hierarchies, and that's probably something that you use most often. Then how do the real stakeholders who actually own the data be, in a way bought onto the platform to say, hey, that this is now going to be a collective ownership that we need to drive from here. So for us, it's not actually saying you need to get new tech. It's not to say that, you need to do everything. Figure out the most important, pertinent use case. Go after it. Go after it with the tech that you already have in place. I think that's a great starting point for most organizations. Just that conscious effort of saying, I need to get this right day in, day out.
Well, and usually payroll is the first one.
Yes.
So that's exactly, what we also like. So when we, have a board with the HR payers, we typically say that, why don't you look at the top 5 metrics, which you report every month to your board or to the leadership, right? So can you identify what is the definition which is used across the HR teams and finance and payroll? Let's start with that as a starting point, right? Once you get to a common definition for those 5 to 6 metrics, so can you also finalize the owner of that metric? That if in case that owner or, in case the data goes off track, so who's the person who is responsible for maintaining that? So just that level of identifying the first few metrics, the data owners and dictionaries, that itself gives you a very good starting point.
Ankit, I have a real world case where I was consulting with an organization that did exactly that. They said, we're going to go back and review the data that underlies all this because we provide it to our board. And then they realized that the data was wrong. And then they got really upset and they got really nervous about telling the board that they'd been looking at wrong numbers. And I said, why? I said, we're now doing an audit to make sure that the numbers they're looking at are accurate. We're looking back in time with today's lens. And so there's no harm in telling the board, hey, I'm restating the numbers because what we found is an inconsistency. And now we want to make it more accurate for today.
Yeah.
And they said, oh, have you done this before? I said, yes, I've done this a lot. And I've had these conversations with board. But I think a lot of people are worried. They put their head in their sands. They go, we've been doing this way forever, and I don't want to see if it's bad or not.
Yeah.
But then something comes up and makes it obvious, whether that's a call out by an investor, whether it's a problem that manifests like and it becomes a shareholder issue. Don't do that. Don't put your head in the sand. Being an ostrich is not a good argument for what you've been doing wrong in the past. And so to your point, Ankit, I think it's a really brilliant idea. Look at the top 5 things that you report to your board or that you report to your leaders. Make sure they're accurate, because saying I'm sorry or saying we found a problem is better to do it on the proactive than doing it when someone calls it out and goes, this is crap.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Agreed, David.
So those are 2 beginning parts, and I'm sure we could spend hours on this. Let me give you another couple minutes. What do you think if someone were to start on this, after listening to this podcast, they're going to look at their first 5 metrics, and Raswinder, they're going to look at their biggest problem area or their first stop. What would you say would be the next step for them? Would it be to start to get a cross-functional team? Would it start to, look at an ROI case? What would your idea be for that next step?
Yeah, I think for us, the next exact step should be for you to define the right, the context in which the data needs to be used. So basically getting the 2 or 3 stakeholders, and you don't want to get 10 or 15, right? Because that's not going to be a good starting point. Getting the 2 or 3 stakeholders that actually govern the metrics, own the metrics, and through them basically identify what's been the most common definitions that you've used on the data. How does the data really sit through when you look at the different systems, and does it naturally permeate in the right way, right? Because As I was giving the example, employee ID works across all your platforms, right? Except, for example, in ATS. So making sure that you're using a consistent view across your core systems, making sure that it's utilized in the right way is probably the next step. And then, pick up the next 5 metrics and move from there in terms of just the priority order that you want to work with. You're never going to get to 100%, but you're going to at least get to the 80% that actually matter, or to the 20% that matter in 80% of the use case, essentially.
And I would be honest if I tell you this. I think those are great steps, because I think people tend to have problems with figuring out the next step. And if they just sat down with the people who own those systems and just did what you suggested, I think they'd be a lot more comfortable too.
David, just one point wanted to add, if that's okay with you. Just one point. So typically, and let's be honest here, not a lot of people find data very exciting. It's
We
not
do.
seen, we do, obviously.
Not a
But
lot
not
of
a lot
people.
of not a lot of people, will see, okay, I am waking up very excited to manage data, right? I think when you are starting off, it's also very important to start building a culture and mindset of data excellence, right? So you need to showcase those quick wins to your leadership, that, this is what we have been able to achieve with good quality data. Because it's very difficult, so till the time the data is on track, no one will notice anything wrong. But the moment it goes off track, that is when all the things go up in flames. So it's very important for us to also showcase that, okay, here is what the data quality was, we have been able to improve this. And if in case we were doing analytics on the past data, these are the numbers that you would be seeing, and this is the updated data basis, all the governance checks which we have in place. So now the workforce planning, the audit checks, everything maps up. So just show them the delta between 2 or 3 data quality checks. Even that will help you to get a good win in front of the leaders.
Yeah, I got to be honest with you. It's that conversation of hey, that data you've been looking at, it's not been perfect, and here's why. That, as I was saying before, that scares a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I love your advice, Ankit, because you can't escape it. It's going to happen, and there's nothing you can do about it. But a lot of leaders are going to look at you and go, "Why wasn't the data clean from the beginning?" And why don't you guys spend time cleaning this stuff up? Well, let me give you the myriad ways that's the reason why, or those are the reasons why. But I got to be honest. That's the scariest thing about HR data, is that executives and managers always want it to be pristine, and it's just the disappointment when you tell them it's just not. It's really, this is a surprise to you. Hey, listen, when's the last time you did performance evaluations on your people?
Yeah.
Hey, I'm a leader. I don't have to do that. Yeah, you do.
You do.
Yeah, I think it's just a thing. I want pristine data, but I want no part of the effort that goes into making the data pristine.
Don't make me do it. Hey, if you've ever sent an audit to people, when I was part of an acquisition in the turn of the last millennia, and that acquisition, there were 2 very large companies come together. I was the guy who had to send to every leader their headcount with all of the people's names. And they used to say to me, "Who are these people you sent me? I don't recognize anybody on this list." And I'd say, "They're your people. It's coming from our HRMS. You have to clean it up. You have to tell me who the leaders are, what the hierarchy is. And if you don't know them, I have an idea. Call them. If you've not met them yet, the merger happened already. Call them." And I literally had conversations like that. And they expected me to give them pristine data, even though I only had names. I only had names and managers and job titles. I didn't know who these people were. But they, because they were inheriting these people, they didn't call them. So, it's one of those funny situations where they're expecting me to give them, answers that they don't even know themselves. So,
David, you just sort of summarize the life of an HR ops person. It was very well articulated. Every HR operations person who gets the 2 a.m. call, from the HR head or the business head, that I need this data for, the presentation tomorrow or 2 days later, he or she exactly feels this way.
Yeah. That's what we're going to title this. HR Data Emergency. Yeah. Gentlemen, this was a pleasure. I mean, for geeks like me, this is what I live for. I live for days when I can talk HR data and HR data governance. And I know you guys are doing this too. And thank Talentnode for this, for having you here. And I will hopefully have you on another podcast if you don't mind.
Absolutely. Love to do that, David. And thank you so much for giving us the platform. Love speaking with you and loved nerding out with you again.
Nerding out is exactly right. Thank you, Ankit.
Thank you so much, David.
Thank you, Raswinder. And thank you all for listening. Take care and stay safe. Thank you for listening to the HR Data Labs podcast. Don't forget to hit subscribe and share it with your network. You can also check out the recordings on Spotify or the HR channel, now on Roku and Fire TV. Thank you, take care, and stay safe.